Good afternoon. I'm going to start, and we've got almost 100 people now into the room here, and I've got that it's 1 o'clock. Welcome to everybody to the Cass Business School weekly summer webinar series. We are glad that you can join us, and hope that you've been able to join us over the course of the past 4 weeks as well. This is the fifth in a series. We do have 3 more scheduled, and there may be more scheduled after that time. It is with great pleasure today that I can introduce to you 2 guests who have agreed to join me today. Nicolas Greilsamer, who is an alumnus of Cass, in fact, a double alumnus of Cass. He is a bachelor's honors graduate in investment and financial risk management. Also most recently graduated, although it isn't all that recent, back in 2010 with an MSc in International Accounting and Finance. Currently, he's a principal at Ares Management, having spent some time in M&A at both SocGen and Citibank. As well, he was one of the early presidents of the M&A, which is now the M&A and Private Equity Society at Cass. That's a student-run society. And it's because he was one of those early members of the, presidents, of the M&A Society that I've asked him to join today. Joining me from a more recent class, and also a former president of the M&A Society, is Anna Komarova. Anna is an analyst at Ardian and was an intern at Ardian before that. So one of those people who has gone to staying full-time after having been an intern at a firm. I think something that would be very interesting for many of the students who may be watching this here today. Anna graduated more recently in 2017 with an MSc in investment management. So welcome to the both of you here on this, and thank you for giving us your time. Just in terms of logistics, if anybody has any questions that they would like to ask our 2 panelists, please feel free to write that in the Q&A. We will be monitoring that, and I do hope that after some initial comments by first Nicolas and then Anna, that we will be able to get to as many questions as we can. Again, with well over 100 people here in the room, I'm not sure we'll be able to get to all the questions that are possible, but we'll try to get to as many as we can. So with that, Nicolas, if I can turn it over to you, and it's wonderful to see you here today, and thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me. Look, it's a real pleasure. It's been 10 years since I graduated. Back then, it was a tough market to enter into the job market. Today we find ourselves in a similarly challenging circumstance. Very different set of challenges, both looming recessions, or we were coming out of a recession back then, or just about, and now we're pretty deep into one. Now I don't want to be Mr. Gloom and Doom. There's a lot of hope for everybody on the call who's still a student, and I know a lot of you are living it as there's alumni on this call as well. But this has been a difficult 13, 14 weeks now. The environment we're in, we're adaptable in our industry. We're in white collar industry. So I'm in private equity, and it's the same for those who are in banking. We're a white collar industry where we can work from home with the use of technology, so we can all be very good at adapting. Bankers and private equity deal makers tend to be pretty creative and find ways of working. Not that there's anything that creative behind jumping on a Zoom. But look, it's definitely a challenge. What we're seeing right now is, we're all from home. Some people are returning slowly to the workplace, but it's, the large majority of people are still very much from home, and it'll be that way for some way to come. Our job is, trying to make investments and do deals. So, how do you do that in a work from home setting? We can still meet with people, virtually. We can still do all the analysis. Actually, from an analysis perspective, there's real benefits having more time in the day than ever. Now that we've gotten rid of the commute time, to really prioritize desktop work. The challenge for us is, ultimately we need to see people, meet with people, network, and that's how you originate deals. That's how you analyze deals. And so there's a real barrier right now, which is without the ability of seeing managers and advisors face to face. There's going to be a bit of a limit in terms of what's possible. That coupled with the economic environment means you've got headlines like the ones today around M&A activity being massively down, and something you, Scott, are very close to. There's no signs that's going to turn around anytime soon. The activity is going to change, obviously. Where there's challenges, there's always opportunity. It's true for us too. There's going to be more distress activity. There's going to be a need for, liquidity from many companies, to bridge the current environment. And so, that the types of deals are changing a little bit. But overall activity is, still down because it's tough to do M&A right now. And the financing markets aren't necessarily 100% there. So look, that was a long rambling intro. I'll hand it over to Anna, and happy to dive into any one of those elements if you've got specific questions.
Thanks, Nicolas. Yeah, I think it has been a very interesting past 4 months, because I think personally when we started the lockdown back in March, we were all thinking, it's going to be a couple of weeks or a few months, but now have 4 months. And when I speak to the people in the industry, most of them are coming back to the office, in September or December. So, a really long time frame. And you see, even when we are back to the office, things are going to change in a way, as Nicolas said, we can't really travel. And I think those restrictions are going to be in for quite some time. We can't hold meetings, so all the restrictions that make people, to act really creatively in the way that we work. But I think, obviously things have been quite busy. I think March and April have been definitely really, really busy time. And like from my side, so I work in the fund of funds team, so maybe a bit different to what Nicolas does. So we don't do direct deals, but we invest in funds. So for us, it has been, a really, busy time of analysis of the underlying portfolio and funds. And, this definitely has taken a lot of time. And especially, one thing which is really important for us is, to keep the communication with the managers. So the managers who run the funds, and this has definitely changed a lot since compared to the pre-lockdown period. You utilize technology such as Zoom or phone call, and I was very surprised to see how efficient everyone was. So, things like investor meetings conducted over the Zoom have been really efficient. So, that's definitely, I think, one change that we're gonna persist. That you realize actually you sometimes don't have to meet physically. And I think another just from the work perspective is that I do think there's going to be a change in the way that people work, because from my team there has been a general consensus that you can't really work from home, because obviously you have to be physically there, you have to physically interact with the people. But you realize now that you can be very efficient, and from all of my colleagues I've spoken to, everyone is quite efficient in the work. You're much more efficient in handling phone calls. The meeting that can run in hours, you have a set time in which you have to cover certain subjects. So that's definitely has been quite efficient. So I think it's going to persist, and even when we exit the lockdown, I think it's going to be a bit more flexibility on that side. And maybe I think one thing to address for you as well is, for those of you looking for internships, I do think it's a very interesting time right now, because, people are physically available to speak to you. Because I think, months ago, if you try to connect to someone or reach out to someone, people were, traveling, and it was difficult to establish these connections. I think it's a very unique time right now to build these connections, because people are physically there, even if they're busy, they're there to answer, they're there to connect to you. So I, definitely, I think, encourage everyone to use this opportunity and, to really make yourself visible, make yourself present, and, kind of use this time to really build, your network and your reputation. Yeah, I think I will wrap up and happy to address any questions on any of those topics.
So let me actually start off on a question for both of you. M&A private equity certainly has the reputation of being extremely demanding. When you are working in the office, the midnight, being in there at midnight, getting in early in the morning, lots of traveling, living on airplanes, living in face-to-face meetings, doing due diligence face-to-face, a lot that's very, very intense. Obviously that had to change with COVID. You're dealing with it, obviously, both of you on that, despite the fact that I think you both told me last week that your offices were open, although not everybody is going in, and you might be on a rotation policy. There is the possibility of going in, but not everybody is going back in who can be going in. So clearly things have been changing here on this. But how with all of this now working at home and where you see that continuing for a while, how do you split that business and the personal time? Because it used to be a little bit easier because you went into the office, that was business, and then you could go home and then that was the personal time, kind of, sort of, albeit being on call again, in M&A and private equity. And I know, Nicolas, maybe I'll throw that one to you first, because I know you've got a very little child at home there. So I suspect that's an even more important issue for you. So.
Yeah, work-life balance is definitely challenging in this environment. It took me a little while to get it right. The reality is, and I still don't think I've got it quite right, the lines blur because we're always connected. It's so easy for us to hop on a call these days, and we're having to to adapt in that from that regard. So I think it's tough to really create a distinction between work and life, being at home all the time. But I think there's ways that you can do it. There's firms that do it very well, and I think I don't want to talk too much about Aries, but from a cultural standpoint, we recognize that it's very important when we're working so hard in a challenging environment where there are new kinds of opportunities coming in every day, that we try and recharge when we can. We try and get away from the desk when we can. And we've got ways of doing that. There is best practice. There are quiet days, there are protected weekends, there are evenings where you can switch off, and it's sometimes up to the organization to encourage it. It's sometimes up to the individual to enforce it and have that discipline. I don't always have that discipline. I love what I do, and I think Scott, I see you smiling because it's the same. And when you're at Morgan Stanley and DB, it's when you've got line of sight on something, and when you're on a fast-moving deal, things change, and you can push yourself to really work extra hard. But that's really the reason why we work such long hours. It's not always because we're being told to do that. You have to remember it's often because you want to be doing that. And that's especially true when you get to the more senior levels. At the junior levels, it can be a bit of a grunt. It can feel like you're a bit of a cog in a machine, and that's true, in an M&A setting, in a bank. But that's how you cut your teeth. That's how you learn the hard skills, and that's why you've always got many people wanting to do that. And then it's less true in other environments where some firms just manage culture really well at every level. And not to blow our own trumpet, I think that's one of the things we try and do really well.
Maybe I will just.
How about you? That being at a slightly different level.
Yeah, maybe I just adapt to it. Being a bit more junior, I think it's definitely sort of a 24/7 job in a way that you are always connected with your phone, and if something comes up, you're always available. So I think you really have to love what you do to be in this kind of an environment. But I think, one thing that really helped me is that, obviously you're working from home and you're not commuting. And, for me, that's little time saved. I try to use it, for little breaks, like, run in the evening and just things like that, kind of make this little pause and make you be more efficient. So, I mean, it's definitely kind of up to you to really balance your time. And I also think, you have to be in during your day, try to kind of plan the things that you need to accomplish to be very efficient. And I think especially, working from home, sometimes this things blurry. So it's important to, plan what things you need to do, and then any kind of the pauses that you need to take, obviously. Yeah. And also there should be, I think, a lot of trust in the team. So even if you're a junior, I do feel a lot of trust. So, you are, people know that you're always there, but if you, for example, need to take this half an hour, it's perfectly understandable, and then you're going to reconnect.
Right. Thank you. On that, we're halfway through the session, and I see a fairly large number of people have joined since the beginning. Let me just remind everybody that we've got the great pleasure of having Nicolas Greilsamer, and Anna Komarova, both who are former presidents of the M&A and Private Equity Society, the student-run society at Cass. Nicolas being currently at Ares Management, and Anna being at Ardian. I should point out as well that both of them are here in their capacity as alumni of Cass, not speaking on behalf of their firms on that. So everything they're saying is their personal view on that. There have been some questions, Nicolas and Anna, that have been coming in. And let me give you one of them first to start in, and it's something that I've been seeing in the press discussed as well. How much additional risk do you take on in completing a transaction in a COVID environment without meeting principals face to face? Or do you try to postpone some of those meetings to a point when you can fly to whatever part of the world that might be, or have them fly in to see you? Nicolas, do you want to take a stab at that one?
Yeah, it's a great question, and it's not one that I've totally wrapped my head around, because we haven't done that many new transactions. I think, speaking in generalities, what we, a way of minimizing the risk is focusing on the managers that that you've met already. I think a lot of the benefit of having a pretty wide ecosystem, having done this job for a while, and been here in Europe for a while, is that there are a lot of companies that we know, there are a lot of managers that we know, and so we're not necessarily starting from scratch every time. And so, sure, that limits the opportunity set, because we might not be able to meet a new manager, unless we do it over Zoom. And so, that's a constraint. The opportunity set narrows if you focus just on existing relationships. But that's one way that you can definitely minimize risk these days. And it is an important question, because deal making requires, like I said at the beginning, it requires that face-to-face interaction. You can get a lot done over Zoom, but at one point you need to meet people. And I think we're, for us operating across Europe, we can start to travel a little bit, starting to hear rumblings of people making their way to France. And, once you're on the continent, you can get around with trains, to a fair extent. So, you're starting to see a bit more, a bit more in terms of meetings, but, we're a long way away from, going back to how it was.
Anna, any thoughts on that? I know you're in the fund of funds area, which isn't so relevant, to that question, but I know a number of your colleagues deal with that issue. So
yeah, but I mean, commenting from my team, I think despite I'm in a different team, my answer will be very similar to that of Nicolas. So if you think of the new investment funds or secondary transactions, we try to go for the managers that we know well, where we have existing relationships. I think we try to be quite cautious with any new names. So definitely that is one way to kind of limit the risk in this environment.
Thanks. There's a couple questions which are kind of sort of the same that have come in, which, were questions about how one can get a job in junior recruiting at this particular time. Any thoughts from the two of you as to any advice that you can give? I suspect that's probably from the current students, that's coming in that way. And, maybe you can even suggest how you got your job, but then how that might have been different, or whether that wouldn't have been any different, in today's environment. And by today, I mean the COVID environment. Anna, do you want to start on that? Because yours is a more recent journey in that regard.
Yeah. Yeah, maybe I'm just going to start, with the current environment. I think, the good news is that the companies understand that this is going to be a long-term change. Because, if back in March you thought that, things will get back to normal quite quickly, now I think everyone understands it's going to be a long-term shift. So a lot of companies, and especially big ones, banks, they have been really creative in offering virtual internships. So I know this is one of the areas that has been, rising. And I think for private equity, probably it's going to take a little bit more time to, shift this internship concept, just because, the teams are smaller. So it probably is a bit less structured, but I do think we're going to get there, and we're going to be more flexible in a way. And I think in terms of getting the job, I think when I came to London, it was 2016. It was, Brexit just happened. So it was like also like one of the worst time to look for a job. So I was thinking, the same, it's really difficult. But then, I think, there's always room for talent. And I think private equity is a really good space to kind of search for opportunities, because, the activity has been growing like tremendously. And, if you have seen all the fundraising, new deals, a lot of activity, and there is a lot of demand from institutional investors for private capital. So definitely this field is going to grow. So there are opportunities, and the way to get there, is, I think the best way is to build connections and, try to network with people and be very proactive. And I think I mentioned the fact that people are now more available to be, to reach out to you for a call or a Zoom meeting. But, one other thing I was thinking about for young people is that you have a lot of kind of, seminars and video conferences like this one, which you can attend, and see many people from different companies, even, not being physically there. And I think it's a great chance to reach out to people and to stay connected. And, this way to try to kind of have your way through and in the industry.
Yeah, Nicolas, and any thoughts on that? I know you too came on. I mean, fortuitously, we have somebody here who came in just as Brexit hit unexpectedly. And of course, Nicolas, you were at school and we weren't yet out of the Great Recession when you first came. So not an easy time either.
Yeah, and at the time, I remember we were, a lot of students looking for internships, looking for jobs. Great group of people at CAS, where there was real camaraderie, trying to help each other, trying to figure out how to break in. And there's always been this mentality of breaking into finance, breaking into banking. It always takes something special. It's not just about the talent; it's about the creativity to break in. Sometimes it's a hugely competitive industry. And I think, what you have at CAS is, great resources, great students. And so I just encourage people to work together, figure out where the opportunity is. If M&A is down, restructuring is up. So, focus on that. If M&A is down in consumer and retail, focus on, healthcare, defensive industries, power and utilities, infrastructure, where the government is making huge, investments over the next few years. So pick your spots. To Anna's point, be creative and try and network with people, and really just try and stand out. The hiring is still going to happen. There's going to be virtual internships. So that's one way of doing it. And if you can't get the virtual internship in that investment bank that you absolutely wanted, there's always a plan B. Do something entrepreneurial for 6 months. Even if you fail, get the learning, experience out of it, apply those lessons and reapply, for next year's intake. Nobody's gonna, if you don't make it the first time around, you can always make it the second time around. That was true for me. And in 2009, when I graduated from my bachelor's, tough environment, had an option to go to a bank in France. I really wanted to be in London and start in a bulge bracket. So, I did an extra year at CAS, loved it. And that gave me the opportunity to reapply and make it in the following year's full-time intake. So I think there's a lot of options, and it's just about hustling. And I think that's where, CAS students really have the edge.
So that's how to get it. Then somebody gets an internship. And I know there's at least one of my students who I see is is a participant here who has an internship this summer, albeit one that was changed from being a 10-week internship to a 5-week internship. The whole point about having an internship is to be able to network with people in order to be able to get that full-time job at the other end. And of course, to gain the experience, and that would be half the experience. So any advice for people as to how they can network in this particular environment? Because it is clearly going to be different than asking somebody to go out for a coffee or go to the team drinks that might be taking place on Friday evening. And I know, Anna, you already mentioned something about, there being more, that people may even have more time right now, to connect with people. But, any other advice? And Anna, do you want to start off on that one?
Yeah, I mean, I think one big advice, if you already have an internship, is try to be visible, as visible as you can. And, it comes from multiple things. For example, if you're working with someone on the project, don't email, try to call the person. So try to, build this connection, try to interact with people as much as you can. If you have a meeting, you can have like a summary or some follow-up points. So, there's little things that kind of bring your name up there. So obviously, yeah, and as I mentioned, I think senior people, they do have, obviously, they're really busy, but they do have, I would say, slightly more time to interact. Because I know from my personal example, I have been speaking to my manager quite a lot, so I can see, really this relationship, improving quite a lot. And obviously, because we're all in the same kind of difficult environment, things are getting, sort of a bit more personal in the way that your interaction with more senior people can go. And I think obviously it's a difficult time, so it's good to show your diligence. Obviously, do your work well and be very diligent and be proactive in terms of the kind of the projects that you do, and in terms of maybe like networking with more junior people, things like Zoom or call are great tools. So, I've been having some Zoom calls with some of my colleagues, and we have like five floors. So some of my colleagues I don't see as often, and I think I've been seeing more people now thanks to Zoom. So, definitely try to be proactive, use technology, and, just do the best work that you can, really. And I'm and you're going to get there.
Nicolas, any advice on top of that? That's a great answer, Anna. Thank you very much.
Yeah, I think Anna covered it, beautifully. I think that's exactly what it's about. I think right now it's such a challenging time for investment professionals that anybody who's joining an organization right now, even on an internship, can have real value add. So don't underestimate, your value add. Stay close to the professionals you're working with. Try and anticipate how can you make their life easier, and be really missed by the time it comes to the end of the internship. If you're able to really add value, make whoever you're working with workload a little lighter, they'll be hugely appreciative, because it's very busy right now and it's challenging. So I think that's definitely the key to winning a full-time job.
We're
Scott,
down to what I see now
me.
is the last minute, of the time that we have, which I think is probably insufficient to be able to ask another question. There were a lot of questions coming in, so clearly a very interesting topic. A lot of those as well on issues such as, how will valuations be changing, or how will the whole approach on origination and screening of investments change, and so on. And that certainly goes well beyond, what we said we were going to be able to, or what we were intending to talk about in this half hour, which is what's it like to work in a virtual world of M&A and private equity, which I think the two of you have answered very, very well for us from two different perspectives and from two different living rooms, which is even more fun, in today's environment. So with that, I would like to thank both Anna and Nicolas for joining us today, for giving of their time, including the time where the two of them were connecting with me over the course of the past week in advance of this, and also for the entire team. Can I remind everybody as well that this is the fifth in a series of summer seminars that are being done at the same time each week by CAS in order to be able to make sure that we've engaged everybody in the community as much as we can across a wide variety of topics. There will be, or there are still scheduled another 3 sessions. I suspect there will be more beyond that because it's great to see the kind of turnout that we have, where we've had 150, 160, 170 people in the room, since the start. So with that, can I thank everybody for joining us today, and also thank everybody for the questions that came in. Just so you know, Nicolas and Anna, there were both in the private chat as well as in the open questions, somewhere around 25 questions that came in. Clearly, way too many for us to have been able to deal with within the time. So thank you very much for being with us and for joining us and giving us of your time. And thanks, everybody.
Thank you, Scott.
See you next week.
Really great to see you. Thank you.